Hey guys, welcome to an episode of the Amazing Marketing Minds podcast, a show where we feature educational conversations with industry leaders to help our audience learn about new marketing strategies and just things that are happening in the marketing world. The show is hosted by Tortuga Marketing and sponsored by the Triangle Marketing Club of Raleigh, North Carolina. Today, we have Pamela Wilson with us today from let's see here. Big Brand Systems. So Pamela, thank you for coming. I appreciate you joining us. Hi.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah. How do you like North Carolina so far?
I love it. It's a warm day today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what we just had somebody come down from Boston, and that is the first thing they said. I think it's the humidity that kills everybody.
Yeah. But I live in Nashville, so I'm used to it.
Yeah. I do. I know you travel around a lot and visit a lot of places. So I'm sure you get to experience all types of climate.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Well, Pamela, talk to me about Big Brand System. Tell me a little bit about what you do. I'd love to, for people who haven't heard of you before, love to get them up to speed.
Yeah. I started out with a marketing and design agency way back at the beginning of my career and transitioned into this online business in late 2009. So it's been close to 10 years at this point. And what I do now is I teach people how to build online businesses. So I'm taking people who don't really understand how that world works because in a lot of cases, they've had some business experience, but it doesn't necessarily translate when they go into the online space. So I teach them how to make that transition and how to market their businesses in that arena. Wow. So, and that's through things like content marketing and visual marketing. I have courses, I have coaching, I have a membership program. Lots of cool stuff.
Wow. So you've got your hands in a little bit of everything. I love it. Why content marketing? How did you end up landing in that niche?
Content marketing, I love talking about it because I went through this whole evolution myself where I started out in the visual side of marketing, knew I wanted to have an online presence, and I knew that in order to attract people, I had to use content marketing. I knew I wanted to find that audience using content marketing, but I had never done any kind of writing before. If I needed writing, I would get a copywriter. I would hire a copywriter and I would use their words. I didn't generate the words myself. I just always thought, well, I'm the images person. That's my thing, Yeah. So I started to understand a little bit more about how content can go together. I started to see a pattern to really good content. I started to see these elements that were almost always present. And once I understood those elements, I was able to kind of put together content myself pretty successfully. I ended up being hired by Copyblogger. I don't know if you're familiar with that website, but they're a big industry leader in the content marketing space. And they hired me and brought me on to become their executive vice president of educational content. And then they put me in charge of running the blog and their educational programs.
Wow.
So I had that experience. And that's something I talk about in the books also, because I kind of went from my tiny website to this massive industry leading website. And it was a very different ballgame. Yeah, so sure. I just talk about how the content needs change depending on the size of the site that you're managing and the age and all of that. So yeah, I feel really passionate about the topic of content marketing because I do believe it's something that anyone can learn to do. And there are steps and there are approaches and there are elements that if you have those things working together, it's not that difficult.
Yeah,
it can be learned.
100% agree. And I think that the same goes for both individuals looking to learn content marketing as well as brands who are looking to incorporate content marketing into the mix. So we work with a lot of brands that are familiar with it. Content marketing is kind of trending, as of lately. So what would you say to like brands and companies out there who are doing their research, they're trying to slowly get into it? Is there a right way to do it? Would you recommend they look into hiring somebody to help right away? or at least attempt it themselves first?
It depends a little bit on the kind of bandwidth that they have in-house. I think it's very possible to learn and to train yourself to do it. These books are tailored toward people who really don't think that they're writers. People who just feel like they're not writers, or they're not podcasters, or they're not video producers,
People, yeah.
right. So it's really trained to help people to start from scratch and learn how to do it themselves. So I think they can do it. The one thing that I would recommend that they think about, and this seems to be a big change that's happening now, is maybe 5-10 years ago at the most, it was kind of all about how much content you could churn out. It was all about like publishing every day
Quantity.
and just getting a lot of words out there. And I think in a way it's because the internet was so new and it was like this vacuum and we just had to fill it with content, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Nowadays, we have the opposite problem. People are kind of drowning in the amount of content that's out there. So what I'm recommending is that people aim to create higher quality content, that they really go for quality over quantity. So instead of publishing, for example, 5 mediocre pieces of content, they aim to create one really epic, really well-written, well-researched piece of content.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah, I love that. And speaking of your books, by the way, I know, we kind of talked about this a little bit before the podcast, but I know in the books you cover something called the 4-day content creation system, right?
Right.
Could you talk to me a little bit about that?
Yeah. So you do creative work, so you know how
Correct.
this is. When you do any creative work, you get to this point in the project where it's like you just can't even see it anymore. You just become blind to it. And sometimes you have the sense like, there's something that's not right in this, but I'm not sure what it is because you're blind. You've been looking at it for way too long, or listening to it for way too long, or whatever the case may be. And so the 4-day content creation system recognizes that creative blindness is real, and that if you can build in some time away from your piece of creativity that you're working on, that time away helps you to develop what I call fresh eyes. So you see it with fresh eyes again. You have a better idea of what it needs, what it's missing, what you need to polish a little bit. So the 4-day content creation system is basically taking the process of creating a piece of content and spreading it out over 4 days instead of having this one marathon session.
Trying to do it in one sitting with 10 cups of coffee and a Red Bull.
I know. Right. And that's super common. And I think, a lot of people think, oh, I just have to block out like 6 hours so I can create this amazing piece of content. But what happens is toward the end of those 6 hours, you are tired and you've also been looking at it for 5.5 hours and you can't see what it's missing. So the 4-day content creation system is about doing a little piece of it every day. So for example, on day 1, what I recommend is that you create the backbone of the content. And by backbone, I mean your headline and your subheads.
Yeah.
You try to come up with a headline that people will click on, because that is the whole purpose of a headline, is to get people to click on it.
Yeah, of course.
And then the subheads become almost like a very loose outline of your piece of content before you write it. So thinking through your subheads helps you to figure out, okay, what am I going to communicate here, and in what order, and how am I going to lay out my argument, right? So I recommend you come up with a headline and subhead on day 1, and then you walk away. You don't do anything else. So that's all you do on day 1. And then on day 2, you show up, and that is when you caffeinate. You drink your extra cup of coffee, your extra cup of tea, whatever it is, bubble tea, whatever it may be, and you come into it with full caffeination, because on day 2 is when you actually do most of the production. So if you're doing a podcast, for example, that is the day that you record. Mm-hmm. If you're doing a video, like a vlog, that's the day you do your basic recording. And if you're writing a blog post, that is the day you write your first draft. So you work to get that done on day 2. And my biggest piece of advice for day 2 is I always say, write forward, don't write backward. So in other words, do not do any kind of editing on day 2. Just get the words out within that backbone structure that you created on day 1. Get your words filled in all those sections, and do not go back and edit. Because, as a content creator, you use a different part of your brain when you're creating than the part of your brain that you use when you're editing, right? And so that switching back and forth ends up like just adding cognitive load to your brain. So it's better to just think day 2, it's all about creating. I'm getting it created. And it can be a very messy first draft. It can be a very messy video take. It can be a very messy podcast, because you have an entire day for editing, which is day 3.
I see. I'm starting to see the logic behind it.
Yeah,
I can see where some people would, I feel like forcing yourself to not go back and do those edits. I feel like that's where some people would struggle. Because I know, it's a
habit though. It's a habit that you develop like anything else.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, and you just have to say to yourself, you know what? No one's going to see this. It can be totally messy. It can sound terrible. It can have all these outtakes. It's fine. No one's going to see it except for you on day 3.
Yeah.
So on day 3, you show up with your editor hat, and you're going to go in and really try to, first of all, you're reading it all with fresh eyes. So you're seeing it with fresh eyes, top to bottom or start to finish. And you have a chance to kind of see it the way your reader will see it, or your listener or viewer will see it. You see it with fresh eyes. So you can see what might be wrong, what you need to polish up, what you need to edit, what you need to add to. For a piece of written content, the big advice that I have for people on day 3, once you're done with all the editing, is to go back and add some formatting so it seems easier to read. So that usually means shorter paragraphs, bulleted lists, block quotes, anything that will break it up and make it easier for people, because people read on the web very differently than how they read a book.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, you're correct.
So you want to have lots of formatting. And then I always recommend that people add an image, because images, again, use a different part of our brains than words. Or even audio and video, like an image, for example, if you're posting on YouTube or you have a podcast, you want to create an episode image or an image for that particular vlog that you're putting out,
right.
Like a splash screen
like a nice
kind
thumbnail.
of image, right? Yeah. And then because that becomes like a little ad for your piece of content every time you share it on social media, that's the ad.
Yeah.
Right?
The thumbnail isn't great. I usually don't even click on it. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's the same thing for written content. You want to have a blog post image at the top that's kind of getting people excited to read the content and maybe giving them some kind of information. I always recommend people look for conceptual images that tell a little bit of a story to combine with their content, right? So all of that happens on day 3. At the end of day 3, you have it published ready. It is ready to go out into the world. And then on day 4, it's publishing and promoting it. And nowadays, you can't it's not like I'm going to publish this and all these people are going to show up and find it. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of get out there and like beat the drum and get people to show up to consume your content. So that means social media posts. If you have an email list, you email them with your new piece of content. You just want to, it's kind of like announcing a new baby. Like we have a new baby,
guys,
we have a new piece of content.
Yeah.
You send out announcements and you get people to show up. So that's the big focus of day 4, is to just get people there to consume your new content.
I like that. It makes sense from a logistical side. It makes perfect sense. It keeps your brain fresh. I guess I'd be curious to see how that would work when you're juggling a bunch of different clients or different, like, let's say some of the writers will write for, say, a dozen different brands in the course of a month.
Right.
Do you think it would be better for them to do all of their day 1s in the same day, and then all of their day 2s like on a day? So you're not, like you said, you're using a different part of your brain to do a different part of the work.
Right.
So would it make more sense to do like all of the same type of work within one day, Then the next day you do all of the day 2 work.
Right.
What do you think?
I'm going to annoy the heck out of you with my answer. I think it depends on the person.
Okay.
I think
That's
some
fair,
people,
no.
for some people, it would be easy to switch back and forth. And depending on their environment, it might be easy for them to have big blocks of time.
Yeah.
In some cases, it may not be as easy. The one thing I will say is that day 2 work tends to be very intense, because that's when you're actually like creating the thing,
Absolutely, yeah.
right? You got like from start to finish, you're kind of doing the majority of the work on day 2. So I do think it would be hard to do a lot of day 2 work for a big variety of clients. So that would just be, but people have different energy levels. So if you are someone who can knock out, day 2 work for 3 different clients, go for it,
Very cool. I like it. Do you have any other, golden pieces of nugget informations or nuggets like this in your book that you could share?
Well, the one thing we might want to talk about is these 7 essential elements of a great piece of content marketing. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So this was like, my background is design, and designers see patterns. We just see patterns in it, not literally like patterns
Like
on cloth, but like you just see structure. You just tend to see structure. At least I did. So I started to notice over time that really effective content marketing had these 7 elements. And so it helped me, as someone who didn't consider herself to be a writer, to have this structure that I could plug my words into. So it's basically a headline. That's the first. And a headline is all about getting the clicks. So you want to spend a lot of time coming up with a headline or a podcast episode name, whatever it may be, that will get people to visit your content and consume it. So it's the headline. And then it's the first sentence, which people are always like, really? The first sentence? I actually wrote an entire chapter on the first sentence in this book. Wow, that's how important believe it or not. I think it's important.
I do see it, though. I see it, especially in today's world. And that's why we do so much video as well.
Yeah.
It's just people's attention spans are just so short now.
Yeah.
If you don't get it, there's a, I'm sure it's not just a sales thing, but I have a sales background. And there used to be this thing, one of my bosses used to say, it's you have 5 seconds to get 5 minutes.
Yes,
to get 15.
Exactly. That is, it's exactly the same premise. So what I always tell people is you have to imagine that people are sitting there, they come to your page and you're like, impress me, right? Right?
Exactly.
So you got the click with a headline. The first sentence, really the idea of that sentence is to pull them down into the rest of your content or to keep them watching or listening. So the first sentence is really important. You want to be deliberate about the way you write it. You don't want it to be too wordy. You want it to maybe create some curiosity and get people excited about what's coming. So the first sentence is super important. And then the next thing is the introduction section. So in a piece of written content, that is typically what's above the more tag on a website. You know that, right? Mm-hmm. So it's the first 1 or 2 paragraphs at the top of your piece of content, and you're kind of setting up the premise for the piece of content. And again, you want to get people excited so they stay with you, right?
For sure, absolutely.
So the headline gets the click, the first sentence pulls them in, the introduction tells them why they need to stick around, right? And then we have the subheads, and we talked about those already. The subheads are basically a way that you're going to break up your content, but they're super important in written content, especially because people skim. So subheads give them an idea of why they should stay on your page. If they're skimming down and just deciding whether or not to spend 5 minutes with your content, the subheads will keep them there.
Interesting. That's day 1.
Right? Yeah, totally. And then we have your main copy, which is basically everything else. So it's a copy that goes underneath your subheads. It's kind of the bulk of your writing, right? And then at the very end, we have a summary. And this was something else that it's not super obvious. It doesn't typically say, here is a summary of this piece of content. But what I noticed is that really great content tended to tie everything together at the very end. It sort of, it would look back and say, this is where we've been. This is what we talked about in this piece of content. And like you said, people have a short attention span. Sometimes by the end of your piece of content, they don't remember what they listened to or read or saw at the very beginning. So
Absolutely.
A short summary, it doesn't have to be long. Maybe it's only a paragraph, but a short summary that says, okay, this is what we went over here.
Yeah,
okay.
exactly. Did I lose you yet?
Exactly. It just reinforces, because most content is trying to communicate something. So it reinforces what you communicated. And then the very last thing is a call to action, because we call it content marketing, not just content. It's got a marketing component, right? And so it needs to have some kind of ask, and it could be a very low key ask. It could be, head down to the comments and let me know, or share this on Facebook and, share it with your friends on Facebook. It could be something like that. Or it could be click here and download my opt-in incentive, or sign up for a free consult or book an appointment, something like that. But it should always have something, some kind of ask.
Huh.
And that's all 7.
Oh, wow. I like that. I like how there's a very strategic approach to it. When we were first starting out as an agency, we used to be a HubSpot partner agency. You familiar with HubSpot?
Oh, sure.
And they have a very specific way of teaching content marketing. They were very big on written content as well. We were able to take their strategy, and we do use it for some of our video content. We kind of have our own hybrid version of it now. But do you put a lot of emphasis on SEO for your written content?
Yes.
Or is your strategy a little bit different?
Oh, no, absolutely. SEO is a big piece of it.
Okay.
You have to have that in mind as you're creating your content. I mean, I don't think it should be the most important thing, because really you're writing for people. But what we're seeing now is the search engines have recognized that content that's written for people is content that people want to consume, right?
Yeah.
I mean, go figure, So it's very important. It's kind of, as ever changing. So this, what you need to do to rank well is a moving target to a certain extent, but you really cannot go wrong if you write with a reader or the listener or the viewer in mind first, and you just make it a good experience for them. They'll spend more time with it. They'll come back more often.
Yeah, and that's where we're going back to the quality over quantity concept.
Definitely.
Yeah, that's very important. So are there specific types of like businesses, brands, or individuals that you tend to work with more?
I tend to work with people who have some business experience and they're trying to translate it into the online space. So, and they're finding what I found when I tried to do the same thing, which is, the rules are a little bit different here. It's like everything that worked offline is just not quite the same online. So I made that transition, and I love helping people to make that transition. The people I work with tend to have some experience, some expertise, and they're trying to get it out in the online space. In some cases, they want to build an entire business. In some cases, they want it to be like a side business. And in some cases, a few people I help really honestly want to leave a legacy and leave an impact with their information.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That makes perfect sense. A lot of people come to, I don't know if this happens to you, but people come to us, I'm sure, the way they come to you as an expert in what you're doing. And like you mentioned, the online space is always changing. It's always new. It's always different. So what do you do to stay up to date on everything related to like content marketing, for example?
Yeah, I read a lot. I read a lot. And it's funny, I don't know if this happened to you. I used to not be able to read online. I used to just find it super annoying. And now I'm like, oh no. I think I read more on screens than I do on paper. Sorry, books. But I don't know. I made that switch. So I read a lot and keep up with what's going on in the industry. And
Do you have any favorite books? Or anything related to all the reading that you do, where you recommend people like consistently follow to get that kind of information?
Yeah, I'm really bad about favorites. I'm such like a polyglot. I just like so many things.
You just
so
like being fair to everyone. That's what it is.
Well, I mean, I guess, but I'm always switching up. So yeah, I read a lot. What I have found has been helpful because in a time of content glut, I think it's helpful to kind of set some goals for what you want to learn. So if there's let's say you want to learn more about email marketing. So you find some people who seem to be good resources. You subscribe, you read their books, you read their blog, and you read it for a while, but then you like shut it down and start applying it. So that would be my advice, is just set some learning goals and go deep with your resources, but then like stop. Because if you just sit there and read everyone and listen to everyone, you just end up consuming content and not doing anything.
And not executing. Yeah. What is it? What do they call that? Like research paralysis or something like that?
Yeah. Analysis paralysis.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It's very common. And I mean, it's understandable.
Yeah, for sure. You want to make sure that you know exactly what you're doing.
Well, you do. And it's also, I mean, honestly, I think it's when we're consuming content, we feel like we're doing something.
Oh,
but we're not actually doing anything.
Yeah, you do feel
learning.
Yeah, I just learned so much. I just completed that course.
So at some point you have to shut that down and start applying. That's important.
That. You gotta learn, but at some point you gotta do. You just have to.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Pamela, this was awesome. I am getting our time warning here. I appreciate you just sharing a little bit of information on what you're currently doing on your books. How can for everybody listening, how can they find you online? How can they get a hold of your books?
Well, the books are available everywhere. They can go to mastercontentmarketing.com or mastercontentstrategy.com, and those will redirect to pages that have links to. They're available in print, in ebook, iBook, audiobook, all the
everywhere.
book formats. Yeah. So, and then to find me, it's bigbrandsystem.com. And there's lots of good stuff on that site. Almost 10 years of content.
There's lots of valuable information. I definitely, I can vouch for that. I was taking a look at it earlier today.
Thank you.
Pamela, I appreciate you coming by. Pamela is going to be speaking at the Triangle Marketing Club later tonight. It'll be in the past once this is out in the open. But if you haven't been before, and you're in the Raleigh, Durham area, North Carolina, check out the Triangle Marketing Club. They have speakers come by, industry leaders, talk about marketing, different aspects of marketing, both entry level as well as really advanced topics. It's ran by great guy Chris. So definitely check them out. And Pamela, thank you for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
That's
this was fun
today.
Thanks.